Hey, everybody, it's Mark Schultz here, and I am live with another broadcast supporting our recovery in aviation efforts. And I'm here today with my business associate, Manoj Singh. How are you today, Manoj?
I'm doing fantastic, Mark, and always a pleasure to talk to you.
Great, good. I'm glad you were able to join me today. I understand that you've been pretty busy the last couple of days at a special event down in Dallas. What is it that you've been doing down there?
So in Dallas, we had an AeroEngine. This is Aviation Week sponsored AeroEngine Americas conference. So this was a couple of days event. I just came back from there, and it was kind of interesting event in the sense that it was a hybrid event where a part of the participants, attendees, speakers were in person, and a few were online through a video conference as well. So it was a kind of a mixed bag of attendees, I would say.
Okay, interesting, because I remember the one they recently did in Orlando was a mixture of in-person and virtual, kind of events. So what kind of energy was there? Was it really busy, or how was the attendance?
And it was quite busy. It was quite busy. In fact, they had to actually get a much bigger hall than they would usually get it, because they had to spread out the people sitting in the conference, right? So they had to maintain that distance. But in general, there was a lot of energy, a lot of good participation, a lot of, I would say, senior management. Almost every panel that I at least attended, and I did not attend all, but the ones that I attended, I saw that there were senior management, CEOs, and VPs participating in some of those panel discussions. So it was very well attended at the right level in the organization as well.
So was it attended by airlines, MROs, engine companies? What was the mixture of attendance?
So because the theme was, of course, it's an aero engine conference. So primarily it was attended by the OEMs on the engine manufacturers. There were Pratt and Whitney, there were GE and Rolls-Royce and others, and there were also tier 1 and tier 2 MROs and suppliers supporting these OEMs primarily. But there were a few folks from the airlines as well.
Okay, that's really great. I'm glad to hear that. Hey, I want to ask you a few questions about sort of the themes that were going on there. But before I do that, can you tell the viewers out there, who you are, what company you're with, and what your role is in that company? Because I want people to understand, where you're coming from, what your perspective is.
Absolutely, Mark. Thanks for asking that. So my name is Manoj Singh, and I manage the global go-to-market for Ramco Systems. And Ramco Systems is a software company, primarily an ERP software company that caters to multiple different segments. And one of our biggest, of course, business is aviation, aerospace, and defense, where I belong, and then I lead the whole go-to-market for that. We also have a business on the HCM, human capital management side, where the HR and payroll, we manage 50 plus countries payroll on our software as a managed services. And then we also have our traditional ERP for manufacturing, supply chain, logistics as well.
Okay, so you're coming at it from that perspective. So with respect to your aviation aerospace experience, just tell the viewers real quick, what is the type of customers that you routinely deal with? Just the type, airlines, MROs, who is it you routinely deal with?
Yeah. So again, Ramco Systems, our aviation business is unique in the sense, given the portfolio of our offerings there, we pretty much cater to every subsegment which is out there in the aviation ecosystem. So if you look at from the fixed wing perspective, the commercial airlines, the manufacturers, the OEMs on the commercial aviation segment, and all the large third-party MROs in the middle. On the business and general aviation, exactly the same. All the manufacturers, the third-party MROs, and the operators of these business and general aviation. And of course, a very unique segment is the helicopter segment that we are a very big player in. Pretty much all the major operators in the world, I would say 8 out of 10 largest helicopter operators in the world, they use our software. And through them, a lot of MROs that are supporting those operators. And of course, the manufacturers of these helicopters like Bell, Textron, Leonardo, and others, Airbus helicopters, in some shape or form, they also use our software.
Yeah, well, congratulations, because last year I saw with the fantastic developments that you've made in your ERP system, I saw Ramco Systems actually acquire more new contracts than any other, of your competitors out there. And for those of you watching today, that's really why I'm talking to Manoj, because, he really has a lot of insight into what's happening in the market. And so you want to listen carefully. Now, I understand that you were on a panel, and I wanted to ask you some questions about the conference you just went to. What was one of the major themes that came out of the conference over the last couple of days?
Yeah. So before I talk about some of those themes, or the major one out of those themes, I must say that there was an air of what I call as cautious optimism in the whole conference. People are definitely seeing that in certain geographies, the flight hours have picked up, specifically here in the US and North America, right? So that is starting to definitely bring a lot of work for engine MROs, as well as all the suppliers that support them. So there was an air of, I would say, cautious optimism. One of the things that has happened in the last, I would say, 1 year, is that a little bit of shakeup in the industry has happened, which essentially meant that there are a lot of private equity companies who jumped into the mix. They acquired a lot of companies, a lot of mergers and acquisitions have happened. So that overall has led to slightly reduction in capacity in the MRO segment, right? Specifically on the engine MRO, if you look at it, which is in a way good, because now that makes the whole industry even more competitive. Companies have to be more operationally efficient in their operations. They have to be more customer focused in terms of meeting the turnaround time needs of the customers. So overall, that has actually helped in a way for the industry to become more competitive.
So you're saying there's been a bit of a consolidation that's existed out there?
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yes.
And the end impact of that is you're saying there's a little bit less capacity that's occurred out there?
A little bit of a less of capacity, and that further is driving the operational efficiency need for the customers, because the whole environment has become very competitive, I would say.
Okay. So then, given that, I like that response of cautious optimism, because, all of us have a tendency to say, okay, we're off and running again, let's run. Okay. But you're kind of saying the theme is sort of cautious optimism. Okay. Within the scope of cautious optimism, what were the major themes? What was one of the major themes that was coming out of the conference?
Yeah, so if you look at it from the perspective of operational efficiency and how to drive that operational efficiency, a lot of companies have realized that they wanted to make use of this, call it a little bit of a downtime, to actually make investments in those areas which would make them more competitive when the demand actually comes back. And that primarily is around the investment in information technology. That was a continuous theme that we heard and saw, and we also spoke about it. So that was definitely one area where companies put their investment in. Other theme that I would say came out what was loud and clear is, while people were waiting for commercial airlines or commercial aviation to pick up, a lot of investment went into cargo side of the business, right? So even the major players in the industry, they invested and did a lot of configuration changes, conversion to start competing on the cargo side. So that also drove quite a bit of use of MRO activities and engines specifically.
Okay. Just in the news yesterday, I saw somebody talking about there's a lot of supply chain pressures right now, global supply chain pressures. Did that come up at all in the conference discussions in the last couple of days?
No, absolutely. That was also a theme that was very visible in the whole conference. Supply chain disruption, primarily coming from overseas, has been, one of the themes. And the question was, how do you deal with that in terms of looking at the local suppliers here in the US, for example, right? Or North America, I would say. So clearly looking at a local supply chain or localization of the supply chain was an important theme. That also meant that looking at contracts in a slightly different manner, because now if you have local suppliers, then you have different expectations in terms of lead times and service levels, right? So there were discussions around how do you deal with those changes in the contracts, but definitely the impact of supply chain was felt and was discussed in the conference. Yes.
Okay. So I know that we have to create efficiencies in these difficult times. What are some of the key efficiencies that people are focusing on right now?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important thing I would say is how do you become much more nimble and are able to collaborate with your customers in a way to impact your turnaround time, right? So the question is, how do you not only meet but beat the turnaround times that you have with your customers? And that goes back to basically being able to be more productive and minimize the wait time and the waste that is there in your supply chain or within your own premise of the organization as well, right? So previously there was a lot of paperwork floating around. By minimizing or digitizing those paper documents into digital formats, providing those tools like mobile apps to your technicians so that they can actually fetch those digital documents and not have to wait for certain approvals that's all visible on the mobile apps, and being able to digitally sign, and also be able to, if they find any non-routines during the process of, let's say, when they tear down the engine and look for the scoping of the work, at that time when they find any non-routines, previously the whole process of communicating that non-routine back to customers, getting their attention, their approval, and then again starting the clock of the turnaround PAT is to take quite a bit of time, right? So now with the collaborative way of doing the business with customers, they have this portal where they can actually see what the request for non-routine approval is, and they're being able to approve that online and improve collaboration. That has significant impact on the efficiency gain, and that has significant impact on the reduction of the turnaround time. In fact, I heard about people now claiming or at least striving to reduce the TAT by up to 25%, which is huge if you look at it. What it means not only for meeting those numbers or TATs for their end customer, but also being able to look at their own cash cycle turnaround time, in the sense that it's about your as an MRO, your order to cash turnaround time also improves quite a bit. So that efficiency driving into your own cash cycle.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, one of the things I like to do is when people ask questions, I like to see if we can actually really answer them live. And we have an interesting question, that I thought someone asked that maybe you could just elaborate on. So maybe we could just throw that up on the screen, and you could just try to address that question live. Downtime was used to enhance IT. Can you tell more about the type of things that people are addressing through leveraging of this downtime?
Yeah. So I think like I said, the first thing that companies have started to do as IT investment in this downturn is really try to digitize their paper documents. That's the first step towards digital transformation, and that was a continuous theme not only in the conference, but our own experience as a software provider of all the requests and inquiries that we are getting nowadays. It's all starting with digitization of all the documents, manuals, task cards that companies have. Because only when you have all those things digitized is when you can make use of that downstream during your execution process. So I would say that was one investment that was coming out very loud and clear. Other aspect of the digitization was how do you integrate on both ends of your organization? How do you integrate with your customers to improve the collaboration? I talked about how do you communicate the TAT and non-routines and get their approval, but also being able to collaborate with your suppliers, have the complete visibility of the work being done and the impact of any delays potentially on your turnaround time. So that is another area of investment, which is the collaboration on both ends of your supply chain, right? And the other one that we saw in terms of investment was being able to make your technicians more productive through the use of mobile apps, whether they are in the hangar, they are in the field, in the base maintenance, and the use of mobile apps and the productivity that comes with it, being able to take pictures, being able to record audio and collaborate. that just significantly improves the effectiveness and efficiency of the work that technicians do.
Yeah, if I could just add to that is that I work with a lot of companies in the industry, and over the last year, I've mentioned to people before, I've probably worked with 350 different companies in the last year, and so I've seen a lot of different things that are going on in the industry. And if I could just add to that to help answer that question is that I've seen quite a broad range of IT, enhanced IT kind of solutions. And the reason for that is that everyone is generally at a different place in their journey. We're all headed down the path of trying to have digital transformation. And some of us need, optimization of our incoming content. Some of us need to be able to do authoring and content management. Some of us need to be able to manage our maintenance programs better. Some of us need to be able to manage our materials better. Some of us need to be able to manage our planning and production control differently, electronic records, electronic signature, paperless task cards. And so I've seen people in the industry doing things in many different areas right now. And a lot of it has to do with what their current business process is. What are they currently doing right now? And in their business, where do they need to create individualized specific optimizations that will drive the ROI within their business? And so I think one of the key things is that people need to be open to looking more broadly at their business processes and what do we have to do to be able to optimize that, and then applying enabling technology in those places so that we can better optimize those business processes using that new technology. So, I see a real wide variety of different solutions that are being implemented over the course of this right now.
I mean, you said it right. I think in a much more eloquent manner than I did. It's all about doing more with less, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you got to be able to optimize your existing resources to be able to do more. That's gonna be the new normal. You're going to have less of resources, less of time, and being able to do more with those. Yes.
Yeah. So I think we've seen supply chain problems out there. We've seen price increases or price pressures going on. We've seen labor shortages. We've seen labor shortages of the proper skilled personnel. We've seen the need for efficiencies through improved labor and through shortening of TAT to be able to get the work done faster, cheaper, with better quality, and then having all that being done within a digital infrastructure. Let me ask you this: is that are you seeing companies which are successfully implementing some of these technology enabling solutions and actually getting returns? All right, a lot of times returns are touted as you'll get this kind of return or this return if you implement something new. So have you actually seen companies that are getting ROIs and shortened TATs through the implementation of enabling technology?
So I think it's a very interesting question. And I think that goes back to the point you mentioned that everybody is at different stage of this journey, right? And the maturity is also quite wide in terms of where they are in this journey. But I think people are also looking at not just one mega implementation of 2 years or changes and then start to see some value. Companies are starting to see this, what I call the intermediate milestones, right? Many projects call it, and then being able to see the value of those. So like I mentioned, the first thing that everybody is attacking is the digitization of documents, right? Just being able to make everything paperless itself has a tremendous value that companies are seeing. Now, the overall goal, like I mentioned, I heard companies talking about was they eventually want to reduce their turnaround time at the minimum by 25%. So typically we have seen that, somewhere around 21 to 25, let's say 24 days is a very standard TATs companies have, right? To be able to bring that down from 24 to 18 is a big deal, right? And that's where companies are going after, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. I think people are starting to see those benefits. And one thing that also I think companies mentioned was the skill set shortages, right? And there, companies are starting to tap into different types of resources or reskilling their resources to do different types of work. For example, from just wrench turning to be able to do data analysis. Now that's a big leap, but now those are the additional value added services that MROs are starting to provide to the end customers, that they will be able to look at the data and be able to help with much better predictive maintenance to the end customer, the airlines, specifically the smaller ones that may not have all the sophistication and data, right? Because MROs are getting the data from multiple different airlines and customers. So that's the kind of value-added services that companies are starting to think about providing, and
Yeah.
that also ties back to the kind of skill set that they would need for the people perspective.
You know, a lot of times we get overwhelmed by the magnitude of our problem, and it's just there's so many moving parts, and sometimes we get paralyzed by it. Okay, and last week when we had a broadcast, one of our themes that came out of it was, think big, act small, move quickly. All right, and I always tell people is that you need to think about the big picture, but you need to act in small pieces and just move quickly, because what happens is that we think about small pieces and then we don't implement them, and before we know it, circumstances have changed, and I think many times we just get paralyzed. And so let me ask you this: is that can you help big companies and small companies alone, or are we just talking about major OEMs? I mean, what are we talking about here? Are you helping all kinds of companies?
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think there is the overall mindset and the process remains same whether you apply to a larger organization or a smaller one. So I mean, we have our customers that range from very small 25 to 100 people companies to 3,000, 4,000 people companies. So I think again the point is that you got to be able to understand where exactly they lie in the value chain, right? And when you look at the value chain of this aviation end to end, when you figure out where exactly that company lies in the value chain, and then maturity of their business processes, then you attack it from that perspective and help them digitize, automate, integrate, optimize, and move to the next level in the hierarchy. Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. Hey, I have two follow-up questions I want to ask. One of them is that you had mentioned that you have 8 out of 10 of the helicopter companies in the world right now, of the largest helicopter operators.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And what do you do for them? When you say you have them as a customer, what do you do for them?
So these major operators, I can name them because we already have the press releases. The Bristow, now Era Helicopter is part of Bristow as well. PHI, these are big companies in the oil and gas space. On the air medical side, some of the largest operators like Air Methods, GMR, Global Medical Response. And then on the firefighting side, we have Columbia Helicopters and Ericsson and others. So basically, if you look at all these different categories, and even if you put them together, pretty much all the 8 of the top 10 are using Ramco. And these are companies which are very unique in using Ramco in the sense that they pretty much use the complete spectrum of solutions that we have to offer. For example, they start with making sure that they have all the engineering modules from Ramco in terms of being able to create all the different task cards and digitize them using Ramco's engineering modules, being able to do SP and AD administration using Ramco's engineering modules. Then depending upon the type of maintenance planning that we do, from line to hangar to base to any modifications or even manufacturing for that matter, all of that, they use our software to do it. Now, many of these, of course, these are all operators. So now they use our flight operations module, the centerpiece of which is the electronic flight bag, right? So, and this is very unique with our solution because now these operators and their pilots using our electronic flight bag, real time they can capture all the different parameters, flight parameters that they are capturing, right? And then that flows into Ramco's integrated maintenance module, which starts to forecast the maintenance of these aircraft as the whole mission is completed. Immediately, the next round of forecast for the maintenance is created, right? And then, of course, closing the whole loop with the quality, compliance, and then the finance and accounting, which is the backend ERP. And on the supply chain side, of course, the planning for the parts and inventory, depending upon what the maintenance plan is looking like, and then all the procurement activities that have to be done. I mean, just imagine a scenario, right? That if a pilot is flying and while flying, they run into an issue for which some maintenance activities have to be done. Immediately, that gets real-time notified to the mechanic who picks up that work order or the task and tries to fix the plane, right? And as the technician is fixing the plane, they may need certain parts. Now they can actually trigger the requirement for that parts in the system that comes into the supply chain module. On the supply chain module person, the parts warehouse person will immediately check for the availability of those parts and issue those to mechanics. or if they don't have, then send a purchase order to the supplier that can ship directly to the mechanic who's fixing the plane. And then when everything is all said and done, we can capture the cost of doing the whole thing, right? And then from the finance and accounting, you would have a visibility for a given aircraft. What is your cost of running that aircraft from maintenance and operations perspective is the completely end-to-end package for the helicopter operators.
Yeah, I see you really do have a very broad solution, an enterprise-wide kind of a solution that can help an operator like that. That's pretty amazing, because I don't know how many modules you have, but I've seen it. There must be 50 different modules that exist in the system, or more. But just really quickly, remember, it's been almost a year ago that we interviewed together one of your customers from Ericsson. And I remember that he told me that, they had an effective operation, but it really wasn't efficient. All right. And so they were operating safely, but they really needed to better organize their operation, have improved business processes, reduce cost, manage their supply chain, their operations. And I remember that he told us that through the implementation of the Ramco systems, solution, that they were able to achieve those goals and objectives, and and really operate their helicopters, more efficiently. That was really great.
Absolutely, I think it all boils, from our perspective, it all boils down to 4 or 5 different levels, right? We try to standardize the process as much as possible. We try to eliminate the process if need be. Then with the remaining processes, we try to automate them. Then we try to integrate the process across the boundary wall of the organization, right? And then finally we optimize. When you put all of these different automation, optimization, integration, and then look at the revised set of processes, right? Then you see the efficiency gain coming out of your processes.
Yeah, well, you have some customers that have given really good testimonies that that's been successful for them. Hey, we have one other question I wanted to throw up there real quick. It's a little bit of a longer question, but I think we'll throw it up there. I like to be able to answer people's questions live, because they like to know that we're actually listening, to what they're doing. So maybe you could look at this as that someone's looking for what are the best case scenarios for global airlines headquartered in Europe to remain effective. Airline travel are seeing in the USA this year. So they're saying, what are the best case scenarios for airlines headquartered in Europe? Okay, and
yeah, so I think how to prepare for the return of near normal in Europe, just like it is starting to happen in the US, right? So I think like I said, I think you can learn from what companies in the US have done, which was during the downtime. They did not stop the investment into the infrastructure, and information technology is one part of that infrastructure, in making sure that when the demand comes back, they are ready to make use of it. And that's, I think, what it should do, because it is going to come. It is coming, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's coming fast, too.
It's coming fast. So this is the opportunity you have to prepare yourself for what the demand might be coming your way. You make sure that you have right optimization tools for your inventory. You have better tools for optimized forecasting of not only your routine jobs, but also for your non-routine jobs. Because now with the technologies like AI/ML, it can actually look at all your unstructured and inconsistent data and still be able to make sense out of it and help you better forecast your non-routines, right? So you got to be prepared with all of these when the demand finally comes back.
Maybe Michael asked a couple of good questions. He asked one follow-up question. I'll just maybe try to address that real quick. If we could put that on the screen. He's asking that, can you help him with predictive, maintenance plans? Do you have solutions as part of the Ramco system that can help in maintenance predictions?
Absolutely. I mean, that is the core of where we are moving. We look at this whole thing as AI/ML is a very important technology that is there for the forecasting, but you have to look at the life cycle of an aircraft. In the beginning part of the life cycle of an aircraft, when number of hours and cycles are limited or limited in terms of the usage, at that point, I think you are more dependent on the OEM provided maintenance plans, right? And checks and that's have to be done. But as the aircraft goes into 10 plus, 20 plus years in the field, then I think it has a different profile of maintenance that gets created. And that's where, and the data gets accumulated as well, right? Then you have to really make use of the AI/ML based
predictive maintenance forecasting. And then, of course, we marry that with the OEM provided original plan as well, and then create out of both really a rich, near real forecast, right? And then make use of it. But yes, AIML becomes more and more important as the lifespan of the aircraft increases in the field.
Yeah, that's the only way we're going to optimize a maintenance program is by continuing to take the factors of operations and rolling them back into the maintenance program.
And if there's one technology that at Ramco we have invested most in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years, it is in the AIML field. So AIML is something that we are using not only for predictive maintenance, the way I just explained to you, but we are also using that for automation of a lot of different processes. For example, if you are a technician and you are trying to add some discrepancy, record some discrepancy, the AIML tool engine can actually take a look at for which aircraft, under what conditions and operating conditions you are trying to enter some discrepancy. It can give you some suggestions on what the discrepancy would be, which you can enter. And then it will also start to give you suggestions on what the root cause or the solution for that discrepancy would be. What parts may be required. If you're ordering part A, in the past, you have also ordered part B. It starts to put the whole package together for you and significantly speeds up and automates and speeds up your whole maintenance process.
Yeah, I think that's really critical that you can actually, use the intelligence. Turning data into actionable information is really important. As part of, implementing any enabling technology. And so I think it's really important that you're able to do that. Hey, I know that we've taken quite a bit of your time, but the questions keep rolling in. Do you have time for another question?
You like to talk, Mark, so let's do that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Great. There's another question there. Let's grab that one. I just like it when people want to ask questions. So how is market adoption on various destructive technologies? I mean, your experience with an adoption of blockchain technology. Do you think major OEMs and suppliers will collaborate? Do you have any blockchain incorporated into your product right now at this point, or is that a future roadmap item, or can you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. So we were actually we jumped on blockchain because we truly believe in the promise of blockchain, and we jumped into it almost 2 or 3 years back itself. And we had created some use cases in partnership with Air France KLM at one point. It was all about tracking of parts and looking at the historical data of where the part has been, right? The history of part, etc., which is a very good use case. But I think what is happening, and we are also part of another consortium in APAC region as well called the blockchain. We are the technology infrastructure provider for that blockchain. I believe CETA is one of the partners there. Heiko is one of the partners there. But here is the dose of realism that I wanted to give. I think blockchain still has not lived up to its full potential in the aviation aerospace industry as it has in other industries like finance and other industries. And my view of that is it is a few reasons for that. Number one is, there is still a general hesitation among companies, whether MROs or part suppliers, to share data, right? Because blockchain depends on every individual chain, because blockchain is a chain, and just like any other chain, the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And that's exactly the way blockchain is going to be, right? If there are players in the blockchain who are not providing input into the blockchain, the data, then it's only as good as the lack of that data. So my point is, I think trying to bring everybody on this mega chain, that has been a challenge. People to share the data has been challenged. But the silver lining, in my view, here is that people need to look at not the whole universe of data and the whole value ecosystem, but look at small pockets of ecosystem that are more manageable. For example, look at, and I'm just picking one example because I thought that was very relevant at some point of time. Lockheed has C-130 Hercules platform, a very specialized aircraft for cargo and humanitarian work. Very well-defined set of customers, or the government customers and cargo operators it has. And I can tell you, in terms of the MROs, there are a handful. You can count on your fingers the MROs that do the repair work and MRO work for C-130, for example. So if Lockheed had to step up and define a blockchain for C-130, I think that's very doable because all the players are very well defined, right? And hence, similarly, if you look at helicopter industry, certain specific models, you can do that. I think that's where people should focus on getting those success stories out, and then gradually, then it can expand to more on the commercial side, where if we talk about 737, I mean, there are thousands of players in the ecosystem, right? It's very difficult to implement starting with that bigger universe than the smaller ones.
Yeah, I think you're right.
A short question. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's okay because I've definitely seen value when there are smaller ecosystems like what you're saying, where the OEM maybe implements certain data sharing. Like when I was at Boeing, Boeing would the operators would share ISDP data, flight data, from operations of the 737 or from the 747, and there was tremendous value in sharing of data from multiple operators because you could see trends and things happening that you couldn't see when you were just looking at your own data. And so I think you're right. I think looking at smaller ecosystems of data that surround, particular fleet types or business problems, where the data isn't being tried to be shared, worldwide, or maybe not worldwide, but across the entire aviation aerospace industry, for example. I think that's really a good suggestion because I think we could start there and gain tremendous value from actually leveraging that kind of data. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Hey, question from me, and then I think maybe we'll wrap it up. But I know that last year, at the end of the year, you did acquire yet another contract. I saw a press release, and I think it was with Iberia. Was it Iberia Technique?
Yeah, so I believe we had the press release for that. So this is the Iberia maintenance. They are
Iberia maintenance. Yeah. Yeah, but with the question I wanted to ask you is that now coming back to the theme of engines, because that's where we started. Now, don't they have an engine overhaul facility there?
That is the biggest part of their business. If I'm not wrong, probably 50% of their business comes from the EngineMRO work.
Okay, so you have a very large EngineMRO, which I believe was committed to another ERP system, and they made a decision to switch and go to the Ramco solution. And I know you're only in the process of doing that just now, that implementation, but why in the world would somebody is such a big facility doing engine overhauls using a whole other platform make a decision to switch to do something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very generic answer, then I will be more specific. I think you have to look at any MRO operation as a very specialized set of activities. Typically in the past, many of these large companies have tried to take their traditional MRO that they have, traditional ERP that they have used for procurement and some of the manufacturing and other activities, and try to stretch them into their MRO side of the business. And quickly the realization was that MRO is a much more specialized, has operations than what a traditional ERP can handle, right? In terms of being able to, just for as an example, procurement of services is not a simple procurement when you throw in the rotables into the mix, right? There's a different concept of, when you start looking into the power by hour kind of contracts, the pooling arrangement that goes along with it. So they're all nuances that traditional ERPs don't have it. So companies in the past have tried to stretch, make customizations to use the software, but really what they realize that they have to use a software that is ground up made for aviation. So that's I would say a generic answer. But more specifically, EngineMRO becomes even more specialized when you look at it amongst all the different types of MRO activities, whether it's line or hangar or component repair. Engine has a much more different feel to it in terms of when you open up, tear down an engine, it could lead to any type of scope of activity, right, that you would have never imagined or thought about it, right? So you have to keep redefining the scope of work, the different gates that the process has to go through. You still do not know in the beginning whether how much of the work is going to be done in-house, how much of outside, and then the collaboration, the communication with the customers that you have to do on a very regular basis for all the approvals, the whole slew of an optimization that you have to do depending upon what the nature of the scope of work. And these are dynamic optimization that you have to do, right? And you put all of these pieces together, suddenly you realize that your traditional ERP don't stand a chance. And that's where we came in. And given the fact that we had been doing MRO aviation work within our software for quite some time, and we were also, our software also has a lot of configurability and flexibility to be able to actually accommodate the change requests that may come from the customers. That was also a very important factor. While we have a predefined solution that we take to market, but we realized that these large engine OEMs or MROs have a very unique set of functionality even within their own companies. So they were looking for a software that was flexible, customizable, and configurable, and that also plays quite a bit in their decision making.
Yeah. Okay. And and from my experience, the cost of engines and engine parts and engine overhauls, is very, very substantial. And so, I guess the bottom line is that they wanted something, I suppose, that was very specific to their operations, very unique to their operations. But it really all boils down to that they're convinced that they'll get an ROI out of it. All right.
Yeah, and that was and again, to the extent I can mention that there was certain reduction in turnaround time that we all together agreed to, right? That will be very much possible. Similarly, we also agreed to certain cost efficiencies that we're going to bring, right? And we can commit to and we can stand behind those numbers because we believe that yes, it is possible, right? The software has both the capability as well as the configurability to be able to meet those requirements.
All right. Well, very good. Well, listen, I've taken a tremendous amount of your time. I want to finalize this with one question: is that 2021 over the next 12 months into 2022, what are you most excited about in the aviation industry right now? What are you thinking?
Certainly, aviation industry has become truly sci-fi movie, right? Every day I see one of the what I call the stealth companies that were in the stealth mode in this whole electric vertical takeoff and landing, drones, UAV, UAS, UAM coming to the surface. And these are not small deals. These are like companies that we had not heard of till yesterday. And today we see that American Airlines signed a $1 billion deal with this company. United signed a $1 billion deal with Archer Aviation, and another one like that. So I think there's another energy of sci-fi coming in. The fact that by 2024, I think we actually will start this urban air mobility coming to life, right? And you will have, helipads for the small drones and eVTOLs on top of your house and flying to the urban areas. I mean, that to me is like, blows away my mind. And that's where the real, what I call the rocket science meeting the normal people, right?
Yeah. Well, I think we all dreamed about that as kids and flying cars and just a few years ago, I used to tell myself, I don't know how in the world you could ever have an electric airplane because their batteries were so heavy and they didn't have, enough power. And it's amazing just to see the evolution of the industry and the technology just in the last few years. So
yeah, and I don't know if I told this to Mark because we definitely have, MRO is one big segment that we have always been doing. Defense is a segment that is growing very fast for us, right? And we are having a lot of conversations directly with not only with the Department of Defense here in the US, but also the foreign militaries. But the third segment that I just talked about, the eVTOL, UAV, UAM, that is something that we believe we have a head start, early start advantage. We just had, our third deal come 2 weeks back. It's a drones company, advanced aircraft company, AAC. They manufacture and operate drones for utilities and some of the military work as well. Last year we had CHI Aviation that manufactures drones for the US Air Force. They started deploying Ramco. And one that I cannot name, one of the largest eVTOL companies in Europe that has signed up with us. And one of the largest e-commerce companies in the US is looking at our drones for the last mile package delivery. A lot of activity happening, and we are very excited about it.
Yeah, well, all I can say is congratulations, to how your company's doing. And I know you've had some record-sized, record deals in the last, year and a half or so. But mostly, I don't see any other company in the industry that is as active and is growing as much as what you are addressing this MRO, ERP, kind of a market space. And so congratulations. I'm going to be looking forward to watching your success. And as our exciting industry evolves, it'll be interesting to see how your support of that industry continues to evolve. And I just want to thank you and your company and all that you're doing, in supporting of the industry, because recovery in aviation is really my passion. And you guys are really supporting recovery of this industry right now. And I want to thank you very much for all you're doing in the industry.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mark. I always enjoy, a pleasure talking to you.
Great, very good. Well, listen, I'm going to sign off now, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's been a great discussion, quite a bit longer than what I had planned, but I thank you for hanging in there with us. And hey, I tell you, fair winds and following seas to you, and have a great day. It's an exciting time in the aviation industry. Bye now.
Bye. Thanks.